Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Steve Breach coming to you here today. Yes, in 2017, still rocking the Aces and Eights beanie. Just got done listening to ESPN's Cheap Heat Wrestling podcast. Honestly, one of my favorite wrestling podcasts that there is out there. If you guys aren't subscribed or listening to it, make sure you go out of your way and hit that subscribe button on your iTunes. And honestly, every Thursday, Friday morning, you'll get some good shit to listen to each and every week. But they talked a lot about the Ric Flair podcast. Both Peter Rosenberg from the WWE's Kickoff show, as well as Greg the Virgin Valentine, the co-host of the show, were both at the New York screening of the Ric Flair 30 for 30. I have been a real big fan of the ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries. It's honestly hard to find real good sports documentaries, and within the last few years, ESPN has sort of picked up the ball and sort of decided this was a good idea to go with. I believe Ben Simmons, when he was with ESPN, started this. I think I messed that up. It's Bill Simmons. Mostly a basketball guy, but he started these string of podcasts, and mostly they do things on basketball and baseball, things of the past. And one of my favorite ones I've ever done is about the fan in Wrigley Field who caught the foul ball, and they show everything that went down with Bartman. They talked about the Red Sox coming back and beating the Yankees, and coming back 3-0 on the year that they won the World Series is another really good one. But these are really good documentaries. Last year we were treated to a documentary about Vince McMahon and the XFL and his partnership with NBC, the one-year league that many people still make jokes about. But this year, we are going to be getting a real, full-fledged wrestling documentary. This is going to be about Ric Flair, entitling his career, which has spanned, just over years and years and years. I mean, Ric Flair is truly one of the legends in the world of professional wrestling. And my guess is this documentary is probably going to be in the area of about 2 hours. And my biggest questions going into this is basically, how do you talk about Ric Flair's career in 2 years? WWE has basically put out 2 different 3-disc sets on Ric Flair. And there's still people out there who debate whether they have enough covered in there over everything that happened in the NWA, WCW, WWE. They've never really talked about the TNA run after the retirement match with Shawn Michaels. Basically, Flair said that he was not going to wrestle anymore, but basically Hulk Hogan and TNA waived that money in front of Rick, and Rick went back to wrestling, where of course he would wrestle, I think it was Flair and AJ Styles against Hulk Hogan and Abyss, and I believe that first live episode of Impact from Vegas. And there's always sort of been that controversy whether Shawn Michaels is upset because of the retirement angle that they did in WWE, which is quite possibly one of the best retirement angles that anyone's ever done in wrestling. My only negative on that fact was that basically it was almost like Flair didn't want to do the angle, and there was many times when WWE just didn't have Flair wrestle matches on Raw for weeks. I mean, I remember he wrestled MVP at the Royal Rumble. He had a big match on Monday Night Raw against Triple H. Which I believe was like the New Year's Raw or something close to that. It might even have been the first Raw of the new year. There was times when you just didn't see Flair forever, and sometimes the matches, they weren't even really built up. They just were sort of thrown out there and said, this is it. If he loses, he's done. And there's no way in the world that Ric Flair is going to be forced to retire by wrestling against a guy like Rob Conway in a match with no heat. You know what I mean? I'm a big fan of Ric Flair. I think Ric Flair is one of the true icons. I think a lot of people have been seeing in the last, week or 2 weeks, controversy of people talking about who is, it's supposed to be on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling. And I think that Ric Flair is one of those guys that gets a guaranteed spot. I mean, there's some people out there who debate, whether, if it's Flair, Hogan, Austin, and Rock, how do you put John Cena in there? If Austin and Rock are both from the Attitude Era, do they both get a spot? Should you give that spot up to somebody else and just pick one of those guys? But I've never heard anybody ever knock Ric Flair. I mean, for Hulk Hogan being the number one guy wrestling for WWE, Ric Flair was definitely the number one guy for the NWA, which meant that he spanned over many more, territories, having feuds with different people at different times. Whereas Hogan basically would have maybe one television feud, and then he would have maybe one house show feud of basically guys that he was going on the road just wrestling, house shows. And in these house shows, he'd be able to wrestle the same match each and every night against guys. ESPN went out of their way. They interviewed, thousands and thousands of people from his past, from Harley Race, Vince McMahon, Triple H. I've heard that they leave no stone unturned. I think it was about last month we dove down and we looked into those Ric Flair documentaries that came out. I can remember the one, I believe it's called I might be getting these mixed up, but I believe the first one was called the Definitive Collection, where it sort of has the white cover with him wearing the black and silver robe. And I remember buying that at the time thinking it was going to be a documentary, but it just basically was something that dove deep into, I believe, 5 or 6 big matches, feuds that he had at the time with, I believe it was Harley Race, Ricky Steamboat, Sting, the 92 Royal Rumble, and had to be Dusty Rhodes. I mean, I know that we've lost a lot of people in the world of wrestling over the past few years, but I believe that I know that WWE helped out with this, and I'm sure that WWE gave ESPN any interview or any sort of clip that they needed. But the only thing that from Ric Flair's past that I can think of that's not going to be around to be interviewed it would be Dusty Rhodes. And I don't think they've been working on this long enough in order to have interviewed Dusty before his passing. Rick and Dusty were basically everything that meant anything to the NWA, or what most people think of as WCW with the Four Horsemen feud. That's probably the one thing that we're not going to get. But things are going to be coming at you so fast. Bam, bam, bam. And I think more than anything, people are going to be wanting to see those Ric Flair classic promos and which clips they pick. There's going to be lots that we've seen thousands of times, but I'm sure they're going to dig down deep and find lots of those small sort of tapes that went out to markets to advertise house shows that he was wrestling on. That we've never even seen before. So I'm really looking forward to this. I know this is going to be airing the first week of November. I want to say it's November 3rd, might be November 4th. I don't know what day of the week that is, but really clear your schedule. Go out of your way to see this. I would say watch it live, the first airing, because the more we're able to show ESPN, I know that ESPN honestly knows that there are wrestling fans out there, that they put wrestlers on SportsCenter all the time. I don't think they do it as often as they used to. They were doing it every Tuesday night for the longest time. But I know Charlotte was just on there. The Miz is on Sports Nation almost every week. And they really dive deep and look into the things that are going down on ESPN. But if we can really pull a huge rating, I'm not saying that they need to do one on Hulk Hogan or anything, but 30 for 30 looking into the world of professional wrestling could happen more often than not. I mean, this is the second year in a row that they're doing a WWE related documentary with the XFL last year, and it would be awesome. I mean, even if they did one on Vince McMahon himself and the growth of wrestling, it could be a real honest look into what went down to build WrestleMania and WWF becoming a worldwide territory, you know, crushing out like the NWA, the Crockett's, crushing out the AWA, Mid-South, and all those other territories. So I'm really looking forward to this. Hopefully you guys can help out by watching it live and helping that rating, and see you guys down the road.